Today, history of early railroad in Central Oregon. Jim Carroll presented this a year ago almost now, up in Madras. I thought I subscribed to the Madras paper because I used to work up there for 7 years. And I saw that, and it took us this long to get Jim back down here to do this presentation. I was a transplant in 2009 to Central Oregon, but he came in 1977, it says, went to the Forest Service to agronomy and has worked in Madras all that time. But he's another one, an example of lifelong learner who loved history, and he's learned all this information he's been sharing as part of the Historical Society in Jefferson County. So he's done a lot of his own homework to figure this all out, and now he's going to share that with us. So take it away, Jim.
We might want to hold that till later. We'll see how we do. Well, thanks for coming. This is great. Wow. I'm not really a railroad dude, but we were part of the Historical Society. We were given a board member, so we were given chores to give we were doing history puffs and said, well, we need 15-minute topics from whatever. I'm the kind of car guy, so I was going to do it on old cars. But the railroad came up, and I live about a mile from the Deschutes River. I can look down and see the old railroad bed. And I thought, that's kind of cool. So I thought, I'll take the railroad. Well, it started out as a 15-minute talk, which I didn't give because I had a shoulder surgery that same day. So that didn't work. So the next like this last year ago is when I gave I had to make it much longer because 15 minutes wasn't enough. Yeah. So here we are today. So I added on to the one I gave before because I wanted to bring Ben in the picture some. So here we go. This is from my perspective of the railroad and the infrastructure and all the things that I thought was interesting to me. So I hope you enjoy the same thing. It all kind of starts back in the railroad came down as far as Shaniko. It was the Columbia Southern Railroad, built from the Bigs to Shaniko. That's where all the freight came in the 1900s. So everything had to be wagon brought in from people and the supplies from Shaniko. Shaniko was developed by two guys from the Dalles and Morrow. They started the town site in 1899, and they were building railroad terminals from Grass Valley to Pineville, which they never finished Pineville. We'll talk about that a little bit. So Shaniko, I'm going to do a little history on Shaniko because it was the hub. It was where everything had to come and then be dispersed out. So you can kind of see the population of Shaniko was 172, and then in 1900 and 600 in 1911 when the railroad came in. Oh, actually, the railroad left then, but the first 6 months the railroad came in, they shipped out 230 cars of sheep, 5 cars of horses and mules, 31 cars of cattle, and 3 million pounds of wool. And most of all that wool and sheep came out of Hickory Creek, the Baldwin land company at that time. And they ran sheep clear from Central Oregon all the way up to Northern California. There's thousands of sheep. Anyway, most of that came from there. And then make sure. Okay, I was going to talk about how many sheep. If you think about 230 cars, there's probably about, I figured, 50 head per car. That's a fair amount of sheep they shipped out of there in 6 months. And the wool, most sheep put off 20 pounds of wool, and so you got 3 million pounds of wool. That's a lot of sheep. And then as things got better, as from 1900 when they came in, and then you start seeing they shipped out more and more wool and more bushels of wheat. And then in 1904 they shipped out $50 million worth of. And at that time, the wool was worth, let me see my notes here, 15 to 20 cents a pound. That's a lot of dang wool. In 1901, they shipped out, the freight coming in was like 1,400 cars a year. Most of that was just bringing in supplies for Central Oregon.
And that was coming from the north, down Shannon.
Yes.
From the gorge.
Yes. Yes. everything kind of came off the Columbia River because they had, steam, the railroads up there already. And then they had all the steamships in and stuff that brought in all the people and supplies. And we talked about the inbound freight was, farming equipment and people. And that boom lasted until, we'll talk about the railroad war that came in Central Oregon, but it lasted 10 years for them. There was a problem when they were going to come down through Shaniko and then come into magnates into Prineville by the stage road. And the problem is that if any of you been, if you guys all been to Uptown Canyon, Highway 97 North, that's a pretty good canyon, and they couldn't figure out how to get around that, or Antelope Canyon, which is a little farther south, up to the south, yes. Here's some freight from Shaniko in 1907 when it cost 20 cents a bushel for wheat, hauled by horse and wagon, and then 22 cents by rail from Shaniko to Portland, which is much farther, was left. It's almost the same amount of money. At that time, the growers were receiving about 30 cents a bushel. There was another railroad that was headed for Central Oregon, and this actually was in 1889, and it came from the west. It was Thomas Hogg, the Oregon Pacific Railroad. You've heard of Hog Rock? The Sandy Am? Well, they never had. Anyway, it was built line from Corvallis up the Norris Fork of the Sandy Am River to Idana. And then from Hogg began building east. And the thing is, he almost had it done. He almost had it done until his creditors forced him to quit. I mean, he had all the grade done and most of the grade done, and then the rails started to spin. I don't know, mistake on their part. Yeah. This is where all the information I plagiarized came from, mostly out of here. It's a great book. He came to the Historical Society and gave a talk. I bought the book then, but it covers. I'm only going to touch a small portion of it. I'll tell you. These are the two guys. These are the two rival tycoons. Jim Hill, Harriman. You'll hear a lot about both of them. Jim Hill, he owned both the Northern and the Great Northern and the Northern Pacific Railroads. And his route from the east was probably around Highway 2, kind of that area through there, pretty high in Montana, Idaho, that kind of stuff. Well, then Harriman, he's the director of the Union Pacific and Southern Pacific, and he took the little more southern route. It's not all the way south, but it's middle of the continent, I guess. And so both those guys worked to the west. So they've been around a long time. We'll talk about Deschutes Railroad first. Now it's with Harriman. It was formed in 1906. Harriman was the director of the Union Pacific and the Southern Pacific, which that's pretty big business then. In March of 06, they started surveying up. I got it highlighted east because you got to remember Harriman was on one side of the Deschutes River and Hill was on the other. So I highlighted east because that was the side that he was on. And you'll hear that all the way along, so you kind of get your mind. Harriman east, Hill was west. It was kind of important for a while. And then he had his was the engineer was George Bosky. And then they started surveying. They finished surveying in 1908. So they took them, probably a year and a part to survey it. And they actually started on the East Bank in the middle of July in 1909. Harriman actually died in 1909, 61 years old, so he never had a chance to see it finished. About stomach cancer. his successor was Robert Levitt, and that was really important because early on, Hill wanted to get together with Harriman and build the railroad, but they were both rivals. They didn't do with each other. So Hill tried, but Harriman said no way until Levitt came along, and then they did join some track at North Junction to South Junction from Madras to Ben, or Metolius to Ben. In 1910, it was getting going. After they got started in 1909, they employed 3,600 men. They graded many miles on the east side, and they laid 6 miles of track in 1910. And then just to highlight the east, that this is after we got it all built. In 1935, they actually abandoned part of it and combined both railroads. So if you're down Max Canyon or down the lower Deschutes, well, that on the west side that was Hill, and then on the east side that was Harriman's. So you can walk along there in some places. And actually drive along, you go to Maupin when you across the bridge and go on that east side. That's all part of the railroad grade at that time.
So where did they start? Where did Harriman start? He didn't start at the Columbia and Illinois?
Yes, he did.
Oh, he did.
They both of
So
them.
they both started that.
Yeah. So I guess I must have missed that. That's where they both started on the Columbia, at the Columbia. Actually, Hill had to start across the Columbia because his railroad was on the north side of Columbia and actually built a bridge across the Columbia at Slido Falls. Anyway, we'll talk about Hill now a little bit. He owned the Great Northern and the North Pacific Railroad. As we said, his was the one that was way up north, Highway 2 type stuff along the Canadian border. That's how he got to the west. He hired John Stevens as his chief engineer. And a little quick note about John Stevens, he was the engineer that built the Panama Canal. And he and Hill were buddies, and so he hired him to actually do a fishing trip up the Deschutes before it started. And it really wasn't a fishing trip. He had money in his pocket, and he bought right away as he went up because he knew they were going to build a railroad. And so he kind of started buying property and right-of-ways all the way along. And he actually, they called himself John Sampson at the time because they didn't want him to know who he was, so and who he worked for. So he was out fishing, but he wasn't fishing. Anyway, when he got back to Hill, and Hill knew about this already some, but they estimated timber in this bend area at 16 billion board feet of timber. That's a lot of things. And as you know, you're all around it now. And then, of course, with the potential Central Oregon with all that timber, and then, of course, what he knew out of Shaniko, all the stuff that was going on there, and the wool is going out and the sheep and all that kind of thing. So he was ready to go up the river. And so in 1905, he started on the west side, on the west side, and the Washington side of the Columbia. And then he filed a survey map 100 miles from the Dalles and Madras in 1906 with the Interior Department. And then he acquired the Oregon Trunk Railroad. It was already established, small railroad, and so he bought it and then for $165,000, and that's what he used as his railroad. The Oregon Trunk construction crew, there were Porter Brothers, and they actually owned part of the business too. And he started construction from the Deschutes River, from the Columbia River. And a little bit later, actually, the last week, he started a week later than Harriman did on their construction. And it's interesting, the supplies that it said they sent up 60 horses and mules, 40 wagons, and 12 additional wagons with camping gear just to get started. That's a lot of stuff. They employed 80, Harriman had 3,600 guys. Hill had 3,800 guys working up both sides of the Deschutes River. And they didn't all get along. I mean, there were rivals, and you hear stories about hand-to-hand fighting, and there was a few things going on, a few gun sites full of rattlesnakes deposited across the river to the other guy's camp, that kind of stuff. I don't know how much it's true, but it sounds good, right? And then February 15th, 1911, that's when the Golden Spike was driven in Madras. And then his Hill's track was abandoned from South Junction to Madras up Willow Creek, as you'll see in 1923. And Hill died in 1916 of staph infection in his leg. That's just kind of a highlight on both those guys. And now we'll get into a little bit more of the construction part of it. These guys here are doing a surveying. They're starting to do a little bit of work. And both John Stevens and George Bosky were both very competent railroad engineers. And I'm going to talk a little bit about I can get my notes here. I'm going to talk a little bit about grade, how important the grade is. If you got a train powered at 1.5 horsepower per ton of rail car, it can do 60 miles an hour on level ground. But when you come to a 1% grade, it slows down to 22 miles an hour. And at 2% grade, it slows down to 10 miles an hour. So you're cruising right along, and then you come to a hill like most cars. So it makes a lot of difference on how the grade set. So most grades are set between 1% and 2% on the railroad. Start getting over 2%, it's really hard on things. You don't get much done. The Oregon Trunk Railroad, its worst grade was from Mecca. It's on the. It'd be just, what Mecca is from. Warm Springs out. If you go up the Deschutes River, a little ways. That's where Mecca. It was actually a stop that they had. And from there to Madras, it was a 1.3% grade for 8 miles. Where Harriman's line, the Deschutes River, Deschutes Railroad line, his was worse from Trout Creek. You ever been on the Trout Creek at Gateway? From Trout Creek to Madras was, let's see, his worst was 1.5%. It was for 15 miles. But that's the one they use today. So I don't know. The Deschutes Harriman's line was built lighter. It had more curves. 2 of the curves were 12 degrees turns, which I think is really sharp, and was steeper overall. That's a little. All this all done by hand. I mean, it's amazing. That's a tunnel. It's not a very good picture, but there's a tunnel being blown through there. You just barely see the other side there. Anyway, it's all hand done, blasting with dynamite, drilling, that kind of stuff. And they had these little ore carts. They had about 1,000 of those that they put the little railroad tracks out to dump their stuff where they need it. Sometimes off the way, sometimes down the way a little farther to fill all the holes in, that kind of stuff. And they had crews all along the way. They weren't just they all weren't working together all the way down the line. There was people that were doing this all the way down the line to get it accomplished. Mm-hmm. So they had 100 camps on both railroads together. They had 100 camps along those 200 miles of rail. So they had them spotted everywhere. This is a cut at Pelton, and you can still see this today. There's a gate across it, but you can look into it. Those are normally in rock. They were 16 foot wide, and in dirt they were 20 feet wide because of the slough off or whatever. But you can see what they had to do just to get to that 1.5% grade. But there's several of those. There's you can see two of them at Pelton. One is off the road, down off the road. The other one, if you drive right by the Pelton Road, it's gated off. You can see it. Here's some trestles being built. at Berry Canyon and, well, Rattlesnake Canyon, if you come from Warren Spring and head towards Madras, on the left would be the first big draw up there. That's called, there was a ferry across the road there at the river, and then also called Rattlesnake Canyon. So it's the same canyon, but but the amazing part to me is, look at all this wood, and all those guys put it up. I mean, that had to come from somewhere. That came out of Central Oregon, mostly. You know, they said it took them, I think, was it 3 weeks to build? I'll tell you what,
Wow.
there's a lot of engineering there for 3 weeks of work. It's just amazing. And that's the part to me is just what got done. Let's see. And this is all raw lumber too. There was nothing treated. It was just cut, and here it is. And so that all had to be hauled in by wagon. It had to come from somewhere. Because the railroad wasn't ready there. They were just building trestles. They didn't have any rail out there or anything. So it had to come all in from all over Central Oregon and north. I think all stuff that was built by the Columbia River probably came off Mount Good somewhere. But the stuff that got closer down to Madras all had to come from mostly out of Grizzly, but there's a lot of it.
Where'd they get all the workers from?
Well, we'll talk about that in a second. I hope I didn't pass it up already.
So the real then came from the Midwest.
Well, yeah, if you saw those two maps, Hill came across.
No, but I mean the literal rail to put on the track.
I think you're right. I don't know where it came from.
Must come from steel mills.
Yeah. I don't know if Portland had much going on. I don't know. We'll go back to building up. I think I missed this spot, Victor, but yeah, the people that actually worked on there, there was no mention of Chinese. It was all Europeans, Austrians, Greek, Croatians, mostly Europeans at that time. And there was, at one time, there's 9,000 people working on this railroad. And I don't think that counted all the guys that were bringing supplies in. I mean, I think that's just the guys that were actually moving dirt. You had all the guys with wagons that were bringing stuff in, camps, who cooked for them. I don't know. Maybe the Chinese, I don't know. They didn't talk about them, so. Okay, like I say, both railroads got their timber and ties and stuff. The local trees and mills. Hill's line did purchase a timber claim up on Upper Willow Creek on Grizzly Mountain, and then they had somebody else mill it for it. Both combined, both of them built 65 miles of supply roads to the railroad, and then they also contracted another 85 miles to get supplies down to the railroad site. Just get roads built. It's just amazing how much that to get done. It kept 600 horses and mules and wagons busy all the time. This is the load of lumber coming off of Grizzly. You can kind of see, you got 4 horses pulling a wagon and another 4 horses pulling a wagon. How many wagons would it take to get some lumber down there? They did have some modern stuff. They had some track laying machines, and that's what we're showing here. You can see how long it is. They got this is where they actually lay the track here, and then this is all supply. And then here they're building the trestle there at Warm Spring, just a little bit south of Warm Spring. That's the Deschutes River. This is up towards Willow Creek. This is coming up Willow Creek now. Missed my notes here. It took 20 men to haul the ties and rails on the supply cars, 35 men to work on the front of the Harris machine. That was the type of machine that they used. There was a Harris and a McCoy. In this case, they used the Harris machine. The 70 guys they had 70 men that were spiking and bolting it together. You'll have to wonder. You wonder why 70? Well, I'll tell you in a minute how many spikes that is. Yes.
How much these workers were paid?
Yeah.
If there were any fatalities or injuries?
Yes, and yes. There was some sound. Most of it was done due to blasting. Premature blast. I don't know. I can't give you a number, but there was plenty. There's lots of injuries. there was a lot of hit with rocks after the blasting or whatever, or come tumbling off, or whatever. There were some rattlesnake bites, a little bit of everything.
Jim, just gonna point at that outcropping in the river that's kind of near
Here?
on the left side, in the water, the outcropping, go up.
Oh, here?
That, if you drive past from Warm Springs, that's where people stand out in the water and fish, right on this side of that spot, just so you know kind of where this is.
Yeah, the highway's down,
Right
runs
there,
right
yeah.
along here. If you look, I'd imagine that tunnel that comes out of Mecca and comes out right behind the gas station at Warm Springs. My guess is that's probably right back up here somewhere. And then it goes on here, and then this, if you drive down that road and you look up, you'll see the trestle, the next trestle is the one, the rattlesnake probably up there. Yeah, that's about right. That'd be Rattlesnake Canyon right there. And then it works its way right on around.
All those trestles are gone.
Yeah, there is some timber.
All the
If you-
local ranchers took all the wood when they heard the railroad was gone.
Yeah, and there is some timber still laying. If you go towards Pelton, you'll see some timbers on Long Lake Hillside. Yeah, I hope I didn't miss my notes here. They were getting 20 cents an hour. Local workers, 30 cents for some stuff. Concrete guys got 40. The Teamsters got, the guys with the horse and wagons, they got $6 a day.
They get paid a lot for pulling stuff.
I didn't talk about that. I'm
It's
sure.
not in today's dollars.
No.
Any idea?
Oh, okay. Well, no. The other thing is that they had while they were moving down the line, they were basically putting up telegraphs along the way to keep communication. They were putting up, they had 15 men doing that, and they were putting 30 poles to the mile. And they were doing the same time they're doing tracks, so they have communication all along. Okay, maybe I got it here. Well, okay. Anyway, this is the track laying machine. The ties and rails, see the ties came up this side and the rails came up this side. So they stacked all these ties and they're placed at 21 inches apart. And then, so you had guys doing that, and then you had guys that were pulling that rail up there at the same time and laying it, and they were spiking them, and let's say we got 21 inches, and let's say there's 3,600 ties, which there are, per mile. And let's see, how many spikes would that be? A lot. Yeah, it'd be one on each side of the tie, right? On each side of the rail.
Four spikes.
So you got four, so 4 times that's a 12,800 spikes per mile. So that's why it took 70 guys. Yeah, they're wore out, I'm sure, by the time they're tough dudes, I'm telling you.
About what kind of path followers they had? Were they just all on their own, or did their families follow them, or the wives follow them? That's about the path followers.
No, the camps were all along, so now, they didn't start putting the rails in and all that until they had almost all the grades done. Because you'll see when we get the Madras, they've already had the grade done for almost a year before the railroad comes. Because they can lay a mile a day or 2 miles a day. So, they get a lot done in 3 months, where it took a year and a half to build the whole thing. No, great question. Any more questions? Please. This is just from the Hills records. When he started bringing the supplies to just put the rails down, 80 to 100 cars a day at a rate for 2 months required enough to begin the laying of track.
Wow.
That's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
The grade, like I said, the grade was set in Madras in 1910. And the track layers, 1 to 1.5 today per day, miles per day. And 150 men to lay track. Like I said, here we go, 3,200 ties to the mile, and we already figured out how many spikes it is, 12,000 spikes. The Oregon Front Railroad, which is the Hills line, they use steel rails that weigh 90 pounds. And the Deschutes Harriman's, his was lighter, it was 75 pounds. But today, they use 112 to 145. What that is pounds per yard, per yard. Let me try to, I keep talking here and I miss all half my notes. Let's see. Okay, that pretty much covers that. Okay, here we are coming into Madras. Madras was the gateway to Central Oregon, they say. You can see that the grade was set. This is in 1910, and this is the Madras wasn't very big, but this was all the tents for all the some of the workers, and they had, you know, when you bring in your workers, and I think I think Madras's population then was like 235 or something. You know, you bring all these people in, they had a hard time. They weren't you call it when you put the house together, or so they didn't. It was platted, but I didn't think the term incorporated. So they finally did in 1910 because they had so much lawlessness. They had to bring in a sheriff, all the rest of that. They had a lot of trouble. They were used to all these guys, you know. They're all having fun. So then in 1911, when you can see that the railroad had come in and the tent cities were pretty much gone. And you start seeing this is right across the Willow Creek within the Madras. And Hill, that came up from Willow Creek, he was the first one to get there. He was 3 months before Harriman. So anyway, when I hear talk about Madras, this is where I pretty much ended. But I'm going to continue on because, but anyway, Madras is the gateway to Central Oregon, so they say. It was a big day for Madras, and you got Hill down in the stake, and then all the prominent people in the area. This part I don't know. They say there were 6,000 people that came. Well, I don't know where they came from. I'm telling you. I mean, there's a lot of people. There's people there, right? I got it, but that's not 6,000 people. This sounds good, but and then another one I have trouble with. Yeah, Madras was 235 people at this time, and they say that, and I'm not too sure about this either. There was a saloon keeper named Benny Stiller. He cooked 2 head of beef in the ground. He did all the vegetables, beans, potatoes, and other vegetables, and he cooked 900 loaves of bread. I'm not sure there's enough stoves to do 900. That's the church. I'm going to say this, but I'm not sure it's going to happen for sure. But we at the Historical Society is working on buying this church for our museum. Not putting, we're working at it. We got some due diligence to do. There's some asbestos issues, there's some wiring issues. So, but we're looking into it. It's built in 1909. I think it'd be a great place for a museum. Anyway, move on. I don't know. There's a lot of people, and they came from all over. It was really a big deal. And you guys, there was a barbecue. And it wasn't a barbecue. Yeah, but that's a short 6,000. I'm thinking. Yeah, I think so. I agree with that. But anyway, it's a good story. Okay, then Harriman showed up, and he came in from Gateway, across the top of the plains, from Trunk Creek. And so they built, here's Hill, right? Coming up Willow Creek. And then here's Harriman to go across the top. And Harriman was 3 months behind. He started about the same time, but for some reason, he was behind. That Willow Creek bridge is 1,050 feet long and 275 feet above ground. And it took them, let's see what's there. Took 6 months to but that's the one they use today. It's still being used. The rips are still there. You know, it's amazing. But you can see they started one end with the other. Willow Creek, right in Madras, if you look to the west, in the middle of town, you look up and you'll see this Just press the border across.
Straight out from the McDonald's. At the intersect- at the Y.
You're looking what due west. And if you'd be down in Middletown here, you look that way. And this came in from the north. North.
Restaurant called La Posada. And if you turn right at La Posada, you will go right under that bridge.
Yeah, the road today goes on this side, which is way right along and over the top. there. Okay, let's see. These are two railroads that, again, there's Harriman's across the top, and then here's Hill's coming this way, and then he was number one.
The road goes right there.
Yeah, the road kind of goes, it goes right here, and it kind of goes that way.
Right past the cut, it goes really sharp right
Yeah.
here.
Okay, then, this Harriman's line came in, and rather than have a barbecue, he decided to have a circus come to town. It was the first circus in Central Oregon. It was made. Let's see, make sure I don't miss anything. This I think is really. They charge $1 a head to go to the circus. People came from Bend, Burns, Lakeview, everywhere. They estimated 4,000. I don't know. I don't know, estimations are what they are, right? Let's see. Harriman's line came across over here up the top, and then he had, up on top of the hill in Madras is where his depot was. It's not downtown. Hills was downtown, Harriman's was on top. Let's see, let me go back one. Oh, wait. Okay, so his depot was over here.
Oh.
Yeah.
On the south side of the.
No, on the north side.
Oh, yeah, that's not.
Not very many.
It was on the east side of the tracks.
Yeah.
Anyway, so they unloaded the animals, top of the hill, moved them downtown. I don't know where they had the circus at, the tent or anything. They did. Let's see. Yeah. Okay, this is really busy, but the thing is, those guys were busy. I'm telling you, every day they had, the only day they had up was Sunday. So let me give you an idea. Okay, May 8th, they were in Oregon City. May 9th, they were in Hood River. May 10th, they were in the Dalles. May 11th in Madras. May 12th in Wasco. May 13th in Grass Valley. Holy mackerel. And they went on that whole chart. Let's say where they went from, let's see, here, there's Madras. Then they went to Wasco, Grass Valley. Then they had a day off. How about that? And then they had Condon, Ione, Heppner, Echo, Walla Walla.
No, they weren't taking the railroad.
They were the railroad. That's how they got around.
Oh, that. Oh.
So they were busy dudes. Anyway, that's kind of a sidelight, but anyway. And then this is Hills Railroad, came out of Willow Creek. And this is where he built, this is headed south that way. Anyway, that's his depot. And that's about Jace Tree, I think. And then this is he also built the storage building here for wheat and stuff. And the supplies came in, they put it off for a while until people had a chance to get to town to get it. Okay, I think that depot is about where the Deschutes Valley Water is today. If you go on the Cobra Highway, you'll see the Deschutes Valley Water right there. I think that's where that was. And then, of course, Harriman had his on top of the hill. Okay, then we go to Metolius. This is where the two lines came together. They came together two places. One is at North Junction to South Junction. And the reason for that is because Hill was on the other side. He was on the west side. Well, he ran into the reservation. And there was just so much of an issue. Because, the trees and all that stuff. It wasn't worse than fighting. So he actually crossed over the river. I don't know why Harriman let it happen or if it was some reason, but he actually crossed the river and they had two lines running along the river until they got to the North Junction. They had two tunnels that were side by side. I don't know. Anyway, they were side by side. They came together at North Junction, and then they were together at South Junction, to South Junction. And that's when they split again, when they went to, one went to like where Trout Creek is, and it headed into Madras this way, and Hill went up along and around coming to Madras. Okay, so then Metolius, that's where they came together. And it was kind of a little bit of a hub because they had 6 big shops there. They had a roundhouse, so they could turn the steamers around and hit them back. You had rail yards and water towers. The water towers and the wells, there were 600 feet deep. There's 2 of them there. And there's, if you look at where the railroad came out of Willow Creek, and it went by the Deschutes Valley water, let's say that's where the depot is. And then you can see all these cuts. There's just some cuts that you can see. And then it kind of goes up past the fairgrounds. We probably do debate about that. We're talking about that. On the railroad that goes out behind Love's truck stop now. It goes clear up to almost to John Deere. So the highway actually ran a part of that grade. And then it turns. Yeah, then it turns and goes back towards Metolius, right it goes into Metolius from the east.
Right behind Charlie's Pizza.
Yeah, and then there's a cut out there, and we talked about that today. There's a cut out there that I thought was pretty level, but apparently not. It's cut in sandstone out there. And it's just like one of those cuts that you see out of rock, but it's right outside of Metolius and comes right into Metolius. Now, why they did that? I don't know. Great, I don't know.
Yeah.
Culver, actually, the town itself was moved 4 miles to the west. It was actually over by Haystack. They moved it towards the rail so it could be on the rail. They moved the post office and store, I think. Anyway, there's this train. You got the warehouse on one side and people on the other.
They're running double track stuff.
No, that was just like, I think some pipe on the side or side by side, trains coming, because they're now on, they're sharing track.
Okay.
Okay, this is quite a feat, I think. I mean, building the River Steel Bridge, it took 4 months. They built from both sides. You know, these guys are walking to work or climbing to work. I think most of you have seen these pictures, but it's great. I mean, here they are working from both sides.
And the trust thing I above you.
Yeah. Yeah, don't want to spit or something. All this metal came from the north. It came in through Madras, over at Metolius, then it went out around Jefferson Butte on the west side of Jefferson Butte. And there's a town to the south of there was called Opal City. So Opal City is where they unloaded all the steel. Now, they wagoned some of it to the north side, and then they took the rest of it around Trail Crossing, crossed the river down there, the bridge out there, and back up the other side so they could supply the steel for the other side.
What year are we up to now?
1911.
Oh, still.
Well, come on, the Madras, it was 1911 February,
Okay.
and then they didn't get the bid. It took them 6 months to get the bid. Okay. Okay, here's some more building. It's just amazing. You know, just the thing is, I built both sides. Amazing feet. You know, 34 feet long and it's 320 feet above the river. The first crossing of the river bridge was done by plank. There you go. I guess when you build it, what the heck? You're already up there, right? Good job. There's been a few of those too, right? The thing is amazing to me, we're still using that same bridge.
Yeah.
The bridge is still being used today. Both of them. I mean, all those iron bridges are still being used. Now, I can tell you all the woodlands are gone, but you know,
Oh, what are done?
the wooden ones.
Oh.
Oh, the trust them, they're all. This is to point out that I know it's busy, you can't see much, but both railroads along the way, about every 10 to 12 miles had stops for water, coal, whatever they needed. And along those towns, they always have little towns that kind of sprung up along the way. You got Mecca. And so one of them down one side, one on the other. No, there's not Moffett in there, is it?
Moffat's up there, yeah.
Lower.
Right here.
Yeah,
Up, right by Tuscany.
Right there, yeah, I see, okay. Let me make sure I get all my notes here.
So did they abandon the Shaniko spur? They keep that one still?
No. I'd imagine that line kept going because there's a lot of,
Yeah.
I mean, all that grain and cattle and stuff that's still in that area.
Haul it down to the beach.
No. But Harriman did use that line when he was building his line. He could bring stuff into there, into Shaniko. And, you know, you got Shears Bridge, you got all that stuff you can pull that direction. Let's see. The Hills line, we talked before when they closed Hills line and up Willow Creek in 1923, all these little towns got abandoned on that side of the river, right? The north, yeah. You know, these little towns like on this side over here got see ya. And then they took Hill had the depot downtown, and he took that depot and this man was moved to Eugene. That's where he ended up. Okay, here's Ben. He made it. It only took him 6 months to get here. I mean, we started Denver in February 15th in Madras, and we finally got here. At that time, Hill was still the main guy, but Harriman's group was there too. They had a celebration. Harriman's group was there because, you know, Harriman himself was dead, but his group is still there because they shared the railroad. Anyway, he got to drive the Golden Spike one more time. He gave some short speeches, as you can see, and it was kind of cute. Harriman, he had his railroad car, his engine and stuff. Well, they had no place to turn around and bid, so he had to back from Metolius to bid. So they say that Hill backed into bid. Anyway, 2 days of celebration, parades, all the fun stuff. Here's a flyer. You know, they had log rolling, they had horse racing, football, boxing, all kinds of fun things. It didn't say how many people were there. Oh no, I did. That's made 2,000. But the population of Ben at that time was 536. Okay, then the railroad and timber. When Hill, 1912, he wasn't very happy. They were struggling financially. You'd think, you know, they only had a year, but here's why. People were not just come to Central Oregon like they thought they would. You know, they got fewer jobs, cold, dry weather, and low wages. So his solution was Hill went back to Minnesota. That's where he's from. And he convinced his friend, Dr. Brooks and Scanlon, to set up a sawmill in Bend. Now, they already had a sawmill. They were already in the sawmill business back in Minnesota. And their timber was kind of starting to run out. So it was pretty exciting. So anyway, Hill gave Brooks 100 million board feet of timber for $1. But in turn, he wanted 10 years of the contract for the use of his railroad to haul all that lumber out. So that's pretty smart. You know, the railroad guys, they got land all along the railroad. They got a mile, I think it's a mile square every other. So he had plenty of things to trade. Let's see. So now, and I don't know. Apparently, Hill didn't know that Sheldon Hicks was showing up at the same time. But anyway, they did. So you had actually two companies, both being developed in 1916. They both built their mills in 1916 across the river from each other on the Deschutes. So, and both lumber mills opened in 1960 across the Deschutes from each other. Oregon Truck, he put spurs in off the main track to both mills. Good for him. And in 1923, they were shipping out 30 cars a day of lumber. But it didn't last forever either. You got these guys, Sheldon Hicks left here in 1950. They sold the land to Brooks Scanlon. And then Scanlon, you know, they lasted until 94. Here's another thing I think is interesting, that both lumber companies had their own rail system to bring timber or timber into the mill that had lumber. They had to bring it from somewhere, and it was easier to use trains. So they had several hundred miles of rails they would grade, put out, get the lumber, go over here and get some more. They all had their own lumber system. So a train system to do that. This is right at now. This is at Chevron Park. That must be. I didn't think it was that deep there. Apparently it is.
Isn't one of the footings of that part of the covered bridge there in Chevron Park? Yes. Is it one time? I have no idea. Somebody saying. Yeah.
Yes, okay, we'll say yes. Just some information I thought was cool. I mean, you talk about how much stuff got moved. This is just the Oregon truck side, okay? He moved almost 6 million cubic feet of rock, loose dirt, hard pan, earth, all done by hand. I think I totaled enough to be 8.5 million cubic yards of material. Now we'll see what comes. Here's the expenditures. This was in June of 12. The grading part, almost $7.5 million. Well, $7.5 million. Bridges, rails. The thing I thought was interesting was legal fees. Got by pretty easy, right? And total for 50, they spent $15 million. Just let me go back. Yeah, and actually in 1912, they were already starting to replace some of the wooden trestles with steel bridges because they were just deterioration. Yes, already. They were high maintenance. We talked about this earlier, but the Oregon Trunk Railroad, sorry. Oh, you don't want to see that yet. Hold on. Oregon Trunk Railroad was built longer and better than the Deschutes, this is Harriman's, this is Hill's. They shared track, North Junction, South Junction, Metolius. And that came only after the death of Harriman because they were still rivals. Oregon Trunk Railroad had 7 trestles, 10 steel bridges, and look at how many wooden trestles they had. 7 tunnels, yeah. And Harriman Hill spent 15 million, Harriman spent 90 million. So $24 million to get these guys. And it took them a year and a half. Well, you can't build a real roundabout in a year and a half. You have 2 railroads come both sides of the river, 100 miles each. They got done in a year and a half. You can't do it today.
They spent 35 million on legal fees too.
Yeah, $3,500. Yes.
Stevens for the whole thing, like all the bridges, what was the?
He was the head engineer, so I'm sure he overlooked all that.
You think for both sides or?
No. You had Bosky on the other side. It was his,
Bosky on one side.
and Hill, yeah, because Hill had Stevens.
Right.
And then Harriman had Bosky.
So he stayed with the whole thing.
Yeah. Actually, when it got done, Stevens owned the railroad when it got done. Cool.
Nice, thank you.
Well, yeah, I don't know how that works. Legal fees, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the legal fees, let's go back here. Yeah, $35,000, not 35 million, 35,000.
So 15 million is like $500 million.
That's doing today. But it was done in a year and a half. I'm just saying, I just can't believe it. Yes.
Did you speak to the relationship between Sam Hill and Jim Hill?
Oh, yes, I did. I missed that. That's a good one. Let's go back. And we'll tie it all together in a second. Jim Hill had a daughter. He had one of 10 kids who married Sam Hill. And Sam Hill was not related, and he was a lawyer, but he was a lawyer for Hill, for James Hill. Anyway, Sam Hill married Jim Hill's daughter. And then they had a child. The child was named Mary. And they have he put a museum on the other side of the Columbia, which is what? But there we go. No, and that was built later, but it's all tied together. So anyway, he was a lawyer. Sam Hill was a lawyer for James. And a wealthy, he did really well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where does that saying come from? What the Sam Hill are you doing here?
You know, I read that the other day too. I don't know. Okay, you had to Google on it?
Roads and they didn't understand why.
Pardon me?
We kept building roads and they didn't understand why.
Oh. No, I thought that we do the chat thing, chat DPI or GPT or whatever it is. Let's see. This is when they started. This is Harriman's line. He starts service. So you get down here in the band, November. They came here in October. They're already starting to head back. So, and the one-way ticket from Band to Portland was $7.49 now. What's up today? $75. I don't know. Let's see what that means. Okay, here's my references.
Yeah.
It's a bunch of them. It's fun. It was fun learning about all this. The biggest that book there is the best one. Okay, I got one more thing for you. Oh, no, too late. No, that's okay. Anyway, I have this video. This is it's on YouTube if you want to look at it. Shoots Driftwood, Hobo Need Walter. This was filmed in 1916, and I don't know why it was filmed. It was just I don't know. But it shows from the Columbia all the way up to Madrid on the river. So I want you guys keep an eye open for these things. You got a steel bridge crossing the Columbia, which is Slido Falls. Then you got a trestle, a tunnel, and a trestle. They say you cross the river, they go across on a trestle, then they go in the tunnel, they come out of the trestle, and then they cross the river twice. That's a horseshoe bend down on the lower Deschutes. Okay, then you'll see the Deschutes Railroad train on the east side of the river, going back towards the Columbia. And then you'll see Shears Bridge, you'll see the Rattlesnake Canyon Trestle, 2 tunnels up Willow Creek, Madras. So keep an eye for that. And I'm going to tell you, there is some, there's a warning. There is some offensive wording. It's a silent film, but there's some offensive wording. So, sorry, I'll hurt your eyes.
On the Shears Bridge, when you look at the Shears Bridge, you'll see the Shears Bridge, you talk about it. There's a hotel way back there you can find out more about that in a book written by Jane Kirkpatrick called Sweetness to the Soul. She married Joseph Shear back in the 1800s. And they built a hotel there, and he had a lot to do with building the Bake Oven Road, which brought a lot of equipment down from the Shaniko.
Any other question about what I talked about before we get into the movie?
On the Central Pacific, some of the early wood trestles were later filled in with gravel. Because the trestle was high maintenance. Anything like that up there?
Well, they were all replaced. They just didn't last long. So I don't know, gravel or they put in culverts. I don't know what they did in those areas, right? All I know is that they were high maintenance and they didn't last very long.
They didn't have pressure treating back then.
No, it was just raw stuff. And they'll pound them up 3 weeks to get them together. I mean, come on. Okay, so here we go. We're gonna go to the video. More time. Okay, now they're all actually on this side of the Columbia, and then the family will go back on the other side. It's just a jump around. With the lateral fall. And that's where he'll start on that side, which is very fun. Still being used to them. If you look a little closer, you'll see some guys down there fishing. Yeah, guys on the other side, just bringing you back, going around. Guys,
Where's the cameraman? You don't count
this is the one talking about. This is that first you've been. You cross the river, through a tunnel, and back to the other, cross the other tunnel, cross the other side.
How fast is this going?
Yeah, probably 20. It's probably a one and something grade, so it's not doing 60. There's Fairman's line going back towards Columbia. There's fun. There's shears. There's the hotel we're talking about. Gives you an idea for approximation. You get the purpose. You know, I don't know where it's happening.
Look at the movies and that.
I would require more.
I don't know.
Okay, so this is where he's on the. What's their orange strip and crossing that. Probably Rouse, it might be Rouse, this is right down where Benora would be, which is right, if you went right on Helton, that little town was there anymore. There's the first tunnel from up the road first. You notice it says 1912 on it, they didn't really finish the outside of those tunnels until later. They built them, got them going, and then they changed it back later, and you'll see up here, it'll say 1912. There's Chairman's line up there, right? And he's coming in the madness. He jumped back down, this is back down to Canyon. They jumped back down over there. You gotta visit him now. Oops. This is funny. They're mattress now. They came out of the canyon over here. People, the mattress people there. There's the warehouse talked about that. This was 1912. There's really no building there. I don't know. Nobody showed up. Good. They built it and they were filming it. Okay.
Well, thank you, Jim, for behalf of Ollie. You can have a cup of coffee now. You gotta fill it up yourself, though. Now, full service.
Thank you.
I appreciate you putting all that together for us and coming down all the way from Madras. Sure. To share it with us. Thanks again.
That's great.